Today is Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. There are 4 board members present. Mr. Hoffman is absent today, and 6 cases on the agenda. We'll start with the first case, which is RPC 3402702A, 2600 Crystal Drive. And Mr. Kim is representing the owner. So you can start, Mr. Kim, with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Good morning. Thank you very much. The subject property is a mixed-use Class A apartment building. Has 412 units and around 2,600 square feet of retail space. The property was built in 2007 and is in the National Landing submarket. The property is comprised of 2 parcels. 34 is the parking lot allocation of the economic unit, with the apartment on 033. The parking lot has 636 spaces, the parking area of 245,000 square feet. The first matter we'd like to look at is the allocation of the assessment for 2025. Historically, the apartments have made up about 92% of the assessment, with the parking lot value being derived solely from the land. In 2025, however, the parking lot jumped roughly 340% in the assessment, up to $58 million, with the apartment allocation being brought down to around 105. We would like to request respectfully from the board that they enroll the prior year's allocation of the assessment, with the parking lot making up around 8% of the total assessment. This is a request directly from ownership, and so we would like the prior historical allocation to be enrolled. Now, if we jump to our second issue, the income approach that we provided on page 2 of the Ryan submission, and then in columns K1 of the BOE memo. The first change we made was to the PGI. The unit mix that Mr. Chiquez is using versus what was reported just differs very slightly. There's no 3-bedroom units that were reported from the client. So that's the first change we made, which just slightly decreases the PGI over what Mr. Chiquez is using. We then factored in the actual 2024 parking income and other income figures. We bumped the vacancy and collection loss up to 6% based off the 5-year average, which was 8%. We then increased the expense ratio to 30%, or $9,566 per unit. If you look to page 3 of our packet, you will see that the historical operating expenses at the property have been at or above 30%. So we thought 30% was fair. We then increased the base cap rate to 5.25%. We have included surveys and cap rate support on pages 4 through 8. I won't dive too deeply into that, as I know that argument has been made multiple times this year. This then derives a total income value of $140,916,600. We then deduct the 2025 CapEx budget below the line of $2.8 million. We provided this information on page 63 of our packet, where you can see the itemized spend that's budgeted for 2025. We did not challenge the commercial value of the assessment, so we then added that back to arrive at our value of $139,529,300. As you can see, if you're looking at page 2 of our Ryan appeal submission, we allocated $13 million of that total assessment to the parking lot, which is in line with what was historically being seen. Roughly from 2020 to 2024, that value has remained flat. And I would just like to emphasize that we would request the board to enroll what has historically been seen on that parking lot figures, as it seems like there was an error in 2025 with the assessment jumping up to nearly $60 million. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chiquez for the county then, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Mr. Kim. can start with the allocation second. The county has no issues as far as reallocating that. From what I can see on the worksheet, it looks like it was done for January 1, 2025, just in regards to the lot size of the various parcels. So normally we try to have some sort of allocation based on the lot size and its contributory value to the overall value. But given that we're recommending a confirmation, it really doesn't make, it's not a here nor there for us if we reallocate. Focusing primarily upon the summary sheet, page 3. Again, I think this is one that the board's seen a couple of years in a row, and it's not too unfamiliar with, unsimilar to a lot of other properties that we have this year. What we've seen is when we're looking at, especially the last 3 years, is growth year over year over year. Just apartment alone was up 4% in 2023, another 3% in 2024. We have GPI again up just shy of 4% 2023, over 2.5% in 2024. The projection made for January 1 by the county was just slightly over 1.5% growth. So a full 1% less than what was achieved in 24 and less than 50% of what was achieved in 2023. EGI, very much the same story, growth of over 2.5% in 2023, almost 4% in 2024. County's projection is just over 1% of growth. Again, not keeping with the pace of the achievements being made year over year over year. When we look at NOI, again, subsequent NOI, it's very much the same thing. Growth of over 6% in 2023 and almost 8% in 2024. The county saw projected rather just under 4%, so almost less than half of what was achieved in the year 2024. With everything else being consistent, well amenitized property, some renovations going on the last couple of years, well located. You'll actually note that this is actually a decrease year over year as projected by the county after last year's assessment. This is actually a year over year negative 1% decline in value, which again is mostly attributable to the increase in cap rate as the property itself has achieved year over year success NOI wise. And that's in much more fitting with the marketplace as opposed to the appellant's request for a negative 15% decline in value year over year. It's just not supportable by the NOI that's in place. That being said, we do recommend that the county's original January 1, 2025 assessment be confirmed at $163,659,100, and we're happy to offer a revised reallocation should you ask for it.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Chicas, any final comments?
No, ma'am. Just again to recognize the year-over-year success of the property, well stabilized, well occupied. The county missed the mark on all the projections, under projecting everything from apartment rents to effective gross to NOI. We do ask the county to be confirmed at $163,659,100, and again are happy to reallocate per the owner's request.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Kim, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chicas, for putting forward the revised allocation. Just one quick word, the actual NOI achieved in the prior years, including the commercial income, was significantly lower than what the county is applying, even with their reconstructed NOI. The reason for this is mainly due to the expense ratio that is hovering right around 30% and has consistently been hovering around 30% over the prior years. We would ask the board to take that into account when factoring in their decision, as well as respectfully requesting that they do take what I have asked for in the reallocation, what Mr. Chicas has stated, and reallocate the assessment, whatever decision they enroll. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board or folks. Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, I think Mr. Chicas kind of hit it on the head. He said that he kind of emphasized the growth year over year and the NOI and how the property is performing well, and it's still down 1% year over year. So I'm okay with the current assessment for 2025.
Mr. Yates, anything different?
I'm fine with current assessment.
Sure. I'm gonna move that we confirm the county's 2025 assessment at $163,659,100.
Okay, we have a motion, and do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Yates, sorry. Okay, motion a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, okay, it's unanimous. The county is confirmed at $163,659,100. Thank you both. Do we have Mr. Harmon and Mr. Peralta?
Good morning.
Morning. Okay, the next case up is RPC 16039-035, 1611 North Kent. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Good morning. This is Building D of the Roslyn Plaza site plan. As we're familiar from the prior two hearings we've heard on this site plan, different parcels of it, the total site plan consists of 1.8 million square feet of office density, 550 multifamily units, 200 hotel keys, and 45,000 square feet of retail. This phase development site plan is very extensive, consisting of 5 phases that will be constructed over an estimated 25 years. Now, each phase of this site plan cannot be started until the prior phase has been completed, meaning that as of the date of value, only one phase was legally permissible to build. Now, phase 1, the only one that was able to be built as of the date of value, consists of 588,000 square feet of office FAR with 12,500 square feet of retail space. Phase 1 also requires significant infrastructure investments, including construction of newly reconfigured streets down there at this site. Now, of course, the task before us today is to establish what the fair market value of this site plan is. What would a willing buyer and a willing seller trade this property for? The assessment values the property based on a sales comparison approach to value, but the assessor's office has not provided any sales comps that were used to arrive at that sales comparison value. Now, as info, the assessor's office is legally required by law to provide the sale comps relied on to reach the assessed value. So suffice it to say, we requested it, legally required to provide it. They did not provide anything. It's implicit that they don't have any sales to support that value. Now, this isn't because there haven't been market sales. There have been market sales. Those market sales don't support the values. So they're relying on pre-pandemic sales, ostensibly. We still haven't been provided them, but we don't know how they arrived at those values, but it's not based on actual market sales. Our value, by contrast, is based on market sales. As you can see on our page, our appeal on page 22 of Drea's memo, we've based our value on the market sale of the Roslyn Gateway site plan. That property sold in November of 23. It was widely marketed, competitively bid, and it's just a couple of blocks away from this property. So that's essentially our case. The site plan is a massive undertaking that doesn't make financial sense as of the date of value. It's got 1.8 million square feet of office required to be built over 25 years. As we're all aware, office values have declined 53% since the start of the pandemic due to work from home, plummeting demands, increasing concessions, and overall lower values. The assessment and us, we both use a sales comparison approach to value this site plan, which is uniform with how other site plans are valued. Yet the assessment, again, doesn't have any market sale comps with which to derive their sales comparison value. In contrast, we do use recent market sales, in fact, one that's just a couple of blocks away to derive our value. As we're aware, the appellant's burden of proof is a preponderance of the evidence. A preponderance of the evidence means more likely than not. In this case, the appellant has presented a sales comparison approach relying on actual recent nearby market sales comps. The assessor has provided a sales comparison approach which relies on, we don't know what, but it's not any recent sales. It must be pre-pandemic sales, sales that are over 5 years older than the date of value. The market, of course, has shifted. The current assessment does not take into account the impact of COVID. Now, on review, the county acknowledged that they don't have any sales that support the assessed value. Because the county has no sales to support their sales comparison value,
They've essentially conceded the assessment's too high. What their review shows is that the land value on the assessment is much too high. On the county's review, they propose a land value of $8.5 million, down from the current assessment land value of $18.9 million. However, in addition to conceding, hey, we're more than twice as much as we should be on this land value of this site plan, which a site plan we are valuing the land. They've conceded we're more than twice as high as we should have been, but we're going to try to claw a little bit of that back by assigning a value to the dilapidated structure of the site. We're going to put $9.8 million on that 1965 fully vacant building, 1965 building that's been completely vacant since 2015. So, we're kind of having the county acknowledge, yeah, we don't have sales to support this land value. You're right, we're more than twice as high as we should have been. But we're going to say a willing buyer would actually pay, here's the actual land value. We agree with you. But then a buyer would also pay nearly $10 million for this dilapidated structure that really has no market value. It's functionally obsolete in the current market. In order to get it up to current standards would require massive outlays. It's essentially no value to that. And that's what appraisal practice tells us as well, is when a property is so old, such as this one, a 1965 building, when it's been vacant for 10 plus years, as this one has, there's really no way to assign value as the way that the county has via the cost approach. Now, by applying that $9.8 million value to the extinct improvements, the county's review ends up at a value of $117 per square foot for that property with their new approach to valuing it. We know this is empirically incorrect based on fair market sales and based on equalization. We know this based on the sales of existing office buildings that were better occupied yet sold for redevelopment. Look at 4601 Fairfax Drive, 60% occupied at the time of sale, mid-1980s build, sold for $102 a foot as an eventual redevelopment. Right down the road from this site plan, 1616 Fort Myer, the county has testified was sold for redevelopment. That property sold at $83 a foot. That building was a newer build, 1975 versus 1965, also in Roslyn, and was also 62% leased at sale versus 0% for this property. Yet this property, again, is at $117 a foot on the county's review versus that sale right down the street at $83 a foot. Finally, another sale comp, 4350 Fairfax, also a mid-1980s build, 60% occupied at sale, sold for $102 a foot. Finally, in the next case, which is the building directly next door to this property, this is 1611, next door is 1621, similar age, 1965 build, similar size. That property is comparable in nearly every measurable, but it has 35% occupancy, so it's actually a better property. The assessor's proposing a value on that property of $81 a foot. So right at that $81 a foot, you'll recognize is right at the sale price of that 1616 Fort Myer Drive sale. That's what the county's proposing on the next property. On this property, they're saying, hey, it's same age, same size, same quality, less tenants, but it's worth more at $117 a foot. So that doesn't really result in an equalized assessment. It's not uniform, and it's really not reflective of market value. Now, a large part of that discrepancy is due to the land value the county has assigned on their revision for these two properties. On the neighboring property, 1621, the county uses $60 per square foot of land. That's the same rate, by the way, that the county used for the Spectrum Theater, also part of this site plan, $60 per square foot of land. The revision on this property comes in at $180 per square foot of land with really no rationale as to why. Why is this land worth triple what the parcels directly next door are worth according to the assessor? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. For this property, 1639-35, as the board is aware, the sister property, 1639-33, was heard a few weeks back, also valued based on the cost approach. In this instance, the cost approach is useful for an empty office building appraisal because it provides an objective and logical method to determine the value of the property. It is based on the principle of substitution, which states that the property's value cannot exceed the cost of acquiring a substitute property of equal utility. Additionally, the cost approach is useful when sales data is limited, as it allows for the estimation of cost and depreciation based on the property's condition and current market. For this property in particular, we did value originally based on a site plan at $60 per square foot per FAR. Now, upon review, we did find that this property didn't have an approved 4.1 approval final site plan. So we did revert back, as you will see mainly today and next week, that we did provide another approach to value at the cost approach for these empty buildings, and did allocate the necessary depreciation based on the effective age of each of these buildings. Now, looking at the land, we did find that we did receive in prior cases appraisals, private appraisals based on land, and they did find and we did review that there were comparables in the area, in the county, at over $119 a square feet, $77 a square feet. And those were most recent sales, again, limited land sales in the county. So we did review that to determine our land rates. And we did reduce that from last year's guidelines from $65 to $60 a square feet. So with this current assessment, we did see that the property's value originally, give me 1 second. Sorry, I can't find my BOE memo. It's all over the place. Got too many windows open. Sorry. Yes, for this property, we originally had 18,963,300, and we're asking the board to reduce this to 18,383,200, based on, again, that same principle of the cost approach. And for this property, we did find that there was, due to its condition, we depreciated the property about 77.5%, which equated to about $33,770,000. And the land total was $8,552,460. So we do feel that the current revised assessment supports the value for this property, again, based on the cost approach. We're open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Penaranda.
Yeah, this is to Mr. Peralta. Before we make a decision on this case, I know Mr. Harmon brought it up, which, I read both cases, the one that is coming up also next. Why is the land value on that case parcel much lower than this? If you use the same approach to assess both properties. Consistently, year after year, they've been pretty much in line, and the ratios have been, appropriate, but the land value on the next case, it just doesn't make sense. And if we were to accept your suggestions to reduce, or make changes, it would not be equalized for this one.
Let me just take a quick look at the other case. For the land value for 1639.35, it should have been valued based on the lot size at 47,220 times 60. It should have been valued at 2.8 million. 2.8. Yeah, 2,833,200.
Can you repeat that number, please?
2,833,200 based on the lot size.
So that should be the value for the land instead of the 8 million sum.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Peralta, can you take a minute to wrap up then?
Yes. Let me reallocate or re-add that 2.8 million. Yes, the revised value should have been 12,663,900 based on the cost approach for the improvement value and the land at $60 per square foot. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up then?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to formally request the information that Mr. Peralta says he relied on to create the assessment and that he testified to today, those appraisals. Those were not provided to us as are legally required. Appreciate Mr. Peralta revising his land value. That value does bring it in to uniformity with the property next door as well as the Spectrum Theater. Comes out to a total value for this property of just over $81 a foot. Now that is comparable to 1616 Fort Myer, which sold at the beginning of last year. However, this property is quite a bit more cumbersome than 1616 Fort Myer. 1616 Fort Myer is a single property, single building. The site plan won't be a 25-year, 5-phase redevelopment that has the extensive outlays as this one. This one should be valued lower than that sale comp. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. So Mr. Penrod, go ahead.
Well, based on the new information that, yeah, because that was something that just had up to my reviews when I read the case. So based on the new information, I would suggest that we lower and reduce the value to the new number. 12,663,900.
I'm sorry, what is it?
12,663,900.
That's change in the land.
I'm changing the land value to 2,833,200 and the building value of 9,830,007. Second.
All right, Mark, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I still have issues with a 10-year-old empty building being valued at that. I mean, it's a demo. It's going to cost them as opposed to giving them value. But that is better.
Mr. Penrod,
Yeah, I'll move that we reduce the assessment to 12,663,900 based on reducing the land value. Second.
motion and second by Mr. Mendez, all in favor? Aye, opposed. Okay, it is unanimous. The assessment is reduced to 12,663,900 by reducing the land value to 2,833,200. Bronzo. Thank you. Okay, the next case is RPC 16039-036, also on Kent Street, 1621. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Yes, thank you. So this is Roslyn Plaza Building E, the neighboring property to the last property. So this one, the assessor, their revision actually gets pretty close to our proposed value. Here again, the initial assessment relied on the sales comparison approach with no sales. You know, when you have a residential, I'm sure you all have interacted with purchasing a residential house, you get an appraisal for the lender. The appraisal comes back and it'll say, here's the subject property, here's 4 neighboring comps that have sold in the past 12 to 24 months, and they'll make adjustments based on that. That's how you do a sales comparison approach to value. In this one, for this property, the assessor did a sales comparison approach to value with no sales. They just kind of pulled it out of whole cloth. Now, on review, the assessor acknowledges there's no sales to support it, didn't provide any, didn't try to justify their value. Instead, they switched to a cost approach to value. Now, cost approach, if you look at appraisal practice, it says for older properties, the older a property gets, it's less and less appropriate to use a cost approach to value. In fact, the literature says an appraiser needs to test whether the existing improvements contribute value rather than simply assume that the current use is the highest and best use because the improvements are already in place. That's what the assessor's done. In fact, the most persuasive analysis of the highest and best use of the property as improved often first test whether the existing improvement should be demolished and the site redeveloped to the highest and best use as though vacant, instead of starting from the assumption that the current use will continue. So again, the assessor's cost approach does come in pretty close to our claim value. Our claim value is a sales comparison approach, which is the preferred method for this type of property, this site plan redevelopment. And by the way, the county's justification that it doesn't have a 4.1 approval, none of these site plans that we've spoken about this year have 4.1 approvals. They're all just approved site plans. So, if that's the criteria, we need to go back, and I would expect county-owned motions to reduce all those other assessments that have been valued via the sales comparison approach without any market sales to support it. Go back, do a cost approach. Think of the Silver Diner, that one would be much lower if they did a cost approach on that property. So if you turn to page 22 of Drea's memo, you'll see our analysis. Roslyn Gateway, just a couple blocks away, sold in an arm's length transaction in November of 2023, just 13 months prior to the date of sale. Roslyn Gateway had a similar mix of units on their site plan. Both sites had a majority of the site plan was office FAR with additional density allocated for multifamily and hotel. Now, since the date of that comp in November of 2023, what has changed? From November of 23 to January 1 of 25, 13 months, has the market improved as the assessor's revision suggests? Has it improved the market for office land? Well, we know that the market for existing office hasn't improved. Vacancies continue to tick up. Absorption has continued to be negative year after year after year. We have 4 or 5 years consecutively of negative net absorption. So existing office properties have decreased over 50% from prior to the pandemic to the date of value. So and that continued over 2024. In addition, construction cost increased from the date of sale of that comp to the date of value for this property, January of 2025. Additionally, multifamily supply has increased in the county by nearly 3,000 units since November of 23 to January 1 of 25. So over those 13 months, just under 3,000 units of multifamily properties were delivered in the county. That's in addition to the pipeline of 14,000 units approved for multifamily construction outstanding in the county as of the date of value. All of this additional supply coming online and in the pipeline, that's resulted in a decrease in rent growth in the county to just over 1.2% annually. So gone are the days of the heydays of 2021, 2022, the peak of multifamily demand when we're seeing, 4, 5, 6% increases in rent growth year over year. That supply has caught up to the demand. What's resulted is rent growth has decreased significantly. So for all intents and purposes, all this is to say from the date of sale, November of 23 of that comp to January 1 of 25, the date of value, the market has not improved for site plans. Both of these site plans are majority office FAR. The market for office has continued to fall. I heard from one broker, it's like trying to catch a falling knife, just where is it going to bottom out? The multifamily portion of these site plans has not increased in value at all. If anything, it's decreased. Supply has come up, demand has leveled off. With that, rent growth has substantially decreased for multifamily portions. Additionally, the cost of construction has increased over the prior 13 months from the date of sale. So if anything, that November 23 sale price is low, that November 23 sale price is high compared to January 1, 25. Yet in an effort to be conservative, we've not made any downward adjustments as should likely be done to account for all those dynamics that have occurred in the market. As it stands, the assessor's revision values the property at $81 a foot. This is allocated as $60 per square foot of land and $21 per square foot of improvements. Now, as I mentioned, this is comparable to that sale price of 1616 Fort Myer that occurred at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. The assessor has testified on numerous occasions that that's a redevelopment as well. Again, that property is a standalone site plan. It's just not any phases. It's just one site plan. You can go in, build it as you please. That's much less complex than this 5-phase, 25-year site plan. So the assessor's revision comes in right at the value of that sale comp for the less complicated, easier to develop property. We know that that's not the case for this property. It is much more complex, much larger, and will be a lower value per square foot. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes. Yeah, this property, 1621 North Kent, as the appellant mentioned, is part of the PDSP in the Roslyn Plaza area. This is building E. This property, as well as the other properties, are sort of the gateway into Arlington coming from DC. So this development, if you will, spans the whole block versus the appellant keeps mentioning 1616. It's a whole block away from that entrance or that entryway into Arlington. I can speak about 1616. They are trying to they're having issues with the easement of a road that goes right through a property and an adjacent property that they own, which has an easement with a utility company, I believe. So there is some difficulty in that situation, which could speak to the pricing for that property being valued at less. Looking at this property again, the private appraisals that were submitted in other cases cannot be shared with the appellant. But speaking about the individual properties, again, in the Roslyn area, there was a sale at $119 per FAR. There was another one just up the street at $77.51 per FAR. And then the other Roslyn property that the appellant keeps mentioning. On average, it's about $83 per square feet. This property, as the appellant mentions, is closer to $81 a square feet. So keeping in equalization, we did value these properties again based on the cost approach. It's an empty building. We did value the other properties that the board heard in the earlier weeks based on the cost approach. We are valuing this equalized with those other properties, and the revised assessment is using that cost approach at $12,410,100. The county is open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Questions from board members? No. No. Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to give us any final comments.
I don't need to comment anymore. Again, we asked that the board revise the assessment $12,410,100. Thank you.
Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. The county's revision again is right at that sale price of 1616 Fort Myer, a much simpler, much more streamlined process. That property is at the entrance. I come home on 50 most days. It's right there. I see it every time. It's very prominent. Now, as we will request again, the county's work information, their work papers that they use to arrive at this assessment. We've heard now the assessor testified twice that they relied on appraisals. Now, the state statute, and this is the law. So any taxpayer or his duly authorized representative whose real property has been assessed for taxation shall, upon request, be allowed to examine the working papers used by any such assessing official in arriving at the appraised and assessed value of each such person's land and any improvements thereon. So I do request that by law that those be provided. Now, these appraisals, by the way, they probably use a sales comparison approach. So why the county can't look at what sales they used and then do their own analysis on that, I don't know. It seems like it's hidden behind this veil of secrecy. But we do request that and hope that the county does comply with the law and provide that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's just among the board.
You know, I've used the cost approach appreciation. And based on the previous days that we saw, it's so that's the assessment.
Mr. Yates, anything different?
No.
But I know that we reduced the assessment from 1,410,100.
Okay, and that's based
Based
on
on
the
the revised.
Henley's revised number.
Yes.
Motion, I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
There are none. Okay, the county's revised assessment of 12,410,100 has been confirmed. And I would ask Mr. Peralta that you get with the county attorney's office and respond to Mr. Harmon's request for that information.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next case is RPC 35008020 and 701. So, Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this is the former TSA buildings in Crystal City. The current assessment represents an increase of 84% from the 2024 assessment. This is due to the county, essentially, they mistakenly double assessed the property. They assessed it 2 different methodologies and then added them together. That's, obviously double assessing it. First, the county assessed it via the income approach to value, then assessed it a second time using the sales comparison approach to value. So, 2 different valuation methodologies added together. We've provided literature in the appeal that goes through appraisal practice that says you can't do that. That is double assessing. Now, upon review, the county did take away one of those methodologies. They actually took away both the sales comparison approach and the income approach and said, we're going to use the cost approach instead. So they've proposed essentially 3 different valuations, one using each different methodology of valuing the property. The revision represents a 55% increase over last year's assessment. So essentially, again, the county's proposed 3 values, one value using each of the 3 approaches to value. The initial assessment combined both the income and the sales comparison approach. That's double assessing it. On review, the county said, never mind our initial review, never mind our initial assessment with the income approach, never mind the sales comparison approach. We're going to use a third approach, the cost approach. As I've mentioned previously, appraisal practice says the older and less valuable, less contributory value that a property presents, the less reliable, the less useful the cost approach is to valuing that property. But in this case, that's what the county has chosen, is the cost approach to present to the board. Now, taking these values, these 3 opinions of value the county has presented in turn, the county values the property via the income approach at $31.7 million. Then the assessor values the property at the sales comparison approach at $70.6 million. Then at the board today, the assessor is presenting a third value using the cost approach. Again, the least useful for this type of property that's site plan approved for redevelopment. They propose a third value at $86 million. So, it appears what happened, they double assessed it by mistake. They assessed it with the income and the sales comparison approach, came in at a value of over $100 million. On appeal, they realized their mistake, and instead of knocking it down to just the sales comparison approach, which is uniform with other site plans in the county, instead of reducing it to $70.6 million, they said, well, maybe we can preserve some of this tax base. We don't have to go all the way down to our sales comparison approach, which is uniform and equalized, equitable with other site plans. Let's come in with the cost approach. We'll claw back 16 million, and try to preserve that tax base. That is still a 55% increase over the 2024 value. It is not equalized or uniform with other site plans in the county that are valued via the sales comparison approach. If the county's proposing cost approaches for site plans, again, go back and make own motions on the Silver Diner site plan. That one was a sales comparison approach. Go back and make an adjustment on the 4420 Fairfax. Those are all going to be lower values. The county knows that. That's why they did the sales comparison approach. Here, the cost approach, they're saying, well, we can get to a higher value than the sales comparison. So let's do that. Instead of going down to 70.6 million, let's try to get it in at 86 million. So again, knowing that we're trying to determine what will a willing buyer and a willing seller transact at in an arm's length transaction. We know that buyers in the county don't value site plans based on the cost approach to value as the assessors proposed here. In fact, when you look at the appraisal literature, the IAAO, the USPAP, the Appraisal Institute, you see the cost approach is seldom applicable to site plans with older or obsolete structures on them, as is the case here. Now, the Appraisal Institute goes further, states that the cost approach is not applicable when the improvements suffer from external obsolescence, as is the case here. External obsolescence means there's no market demand for this property. These existing improvements are massive. They're very old. They were used heavily by GSA for decades. They're functionally obsolete due to both the market and the actual property improvements themselves. They are redevelopment candidates. That is the highest and best use. And in fact, when doing a highest and best use analysis, appraisal practice requires analysis of what is reasonably probable. What is reasonably probable. In this case, the use as the county has proposed is for the vacant buildings to continue as vacant buildings into the future. Why would an owner purchase these buildings to keep them vacant going forward? Wouldn't a potential buyer purchase these properties either to use them as office buildings, refit them, try to market them, try to get a tenant in there, in which case you would use the income approach, which the county comes in at a value of $31.7 million. Or alternatively, if the buyer doesn't want to get a tenant in there, wouldn't the buyer say, well, I'm going to demo these and build new apartments, new retail, whatever's in demand, new hotel, in which case the county sales comparison approach would be more appropriate at the $70 million value. As it stands, the assessor's presenting a value that assumes a buyer would purchase these buildings and just let them sit, not redevelop, not fix them up, not try to market them and get a tenant in there, but just sit. That's what the cost approach to value does. So that's just nonsensical. I mean, no buyer is going to value this as vacant buildings indefinitely vacant. Now, we've heard the assessor testify on many occasions that older office buildings with high vacancy, such as these, are selling for redevelopment. Why in this case is the assessor arguing that the redevelopment now isn't in fact the highest and best use, when clearly that's the way the market values these types of properties? Now, I cannot stress enough that the appropriate valuation approach to these properties is the sales comparison approach. I also have very limited time with which to emphasize this point. So if there are any questions, please be sure to ask. I have included the appraisal literature beginning on page 54 of the memo, and I have more information from the textbook available if necessary. Now, knowing that the market values these types of properties as redevelopment projects and knowing the redevelopment projects are valued on a sales comparison approach to value, we've proposed a value that accounts for the site plan at market rates and with the same discount the assessor's office has given to similar PDSPs, such as Roslyn Plaza. Now, if you'd kindly turn to page 59 of the memo, you'll see our proposed value. Our value is based on the sale of the Roslyn Gateway site plan that we'll hear next. Of course, that occurred in November of 23, professionally marketed for a couple of years, actually. That property was a better location, but we made no locational adjustment to that sale price. We were provided a conservative estimate, made no adjustment for that. So you can see on the right-hand side of the chart on page 59, the approved density at this site plan. Then you see the county's sales comparison approach to value, which, by the way, the assessors provided no sales comps to support, which we saw in the last case. The assessor has acknowledged they don't have sales to support it. So using this actual market sale is a preponderance of the evidence. It is more likely than not that that is evidence of the value of the property. Finally, on page 59, you'll see our sales comparison approach to value using that market sale. So at a maximum, this property should be valued at the county's uniform unsupported land rates and reduced uniformly with that Roslyn Plaza PDSP to $70,600,000. That still represent a 27% increase over the 24 assessment, but at least that's an approach to value that is accepted by generally accepted appraisal practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. For this property, 701 South 12th Street, as the appellant mentioned, is a former TSA site. When looking at this property, it's important to understand this property doesn't have a final approval, final site plan approval. Silver Diner, which the appellant keeps mentioned, mentioning does have a 4.1 final site plan approval. That is the difference that we're trying to make here. This property here does not have a final site plan approval. It has the framework, which the PDSP kind of outlines, but the specifics about what can be built and how it must be built, it hasn't been finalized. So therein lies the difference that the department is trying to make for this property, given that this property is vacant and they have applied for the final site plan approval, hasn't been approved yet. They have it in different phases, as you see in my memo. They're applying for 989,366 square feet of residential, 33,000 square feet of retail. Phase B is the other land base, 601A, 190,000 square feet of residential or hotel, and 14,000 square feet of retail. And then the final site, Phase C, land base 601, 527,000 square feet of residential or office, and 23,000 square feet of retail. So it just outlines the framework. There is no final site plan approval, and that's along with the previous cases that you heard. That is the difference of why we're costing this property versus using the FAR rate at $60 per square feet that you see applied to other final 4.1 site plan approved properties in the county. What's notable about this property is that there is, upon inspection, this property was inspected in prior years, and we did find that there is a utility agreement with this property with MCI. If you turn to page 89 of 96, they have a lease, I believe, on the ground floor of the property that they have the utilities for MCI there until 2028, which would speak to why nothing has been done recently as far as the property is concerned, as far as renting it out as office. We do understand that, applying for these site plans takes years and years of preparation and, getting the documents together. So, there is a lag between when this property was fully occupied, and we'll note that in our summary sheet that you'll see that this property, when it was occupied at 100% occupancy, their NOI in 2020 was 21 million. That would speak to the value of the property. The assessment at that time was 112,347,600. We are revising that original assessment, which was at 102,309,400. I believe the assessor at the time was trying to take into account that extra density that would be allocated to this property if it were final site plan approved. And therefore that is why that additional PDSP density of 70,588 million was added on there. We do find that based on the cost approach, as we've heard with the other properties, it is in line and equalized as far as our approach is concerned. We do ask that the board confirm the revised assessment at 85,925,800. Thank you.
Right, we move into questions from the board. Mr. Herman, I have a question. You were talking very fast at the end of your testimony. Can you repeat back from your notes what you said about the final value? It was like in the very last minute you were speaking.
Yeah, so there's three, the assessors proposed three different values for this property.
I just want the number that you quoted.
Okay, 70,588,000 is the assessor's value that they provided on the assessment for sales comparison.
All right, thank you. Okay, other questions? No? Mr. Yates, any questions? Okay, all right, Mr. Peralta, can you take a minute to wrap up?
Yes. Again, thank you. based on the cost approach, we did value this property at 85,925,800. We do understand that this property hasn't seen much traction as far as, the appellant suggested, why didn't they lease out space? Again, they're moving towards a redevelopment, and because of the current MCI lease, there can't be any construction done to the property. So we ask that the board confirm the revised assessment at 85,925,800. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. Just to reiterate, these site plans are valued by the market via the sales comparison approach. The county's own sales comparison approach comes in at $70,588,000. We contest that that's not the market value. It should be lower, but that's their own analysis. That's how developers and investors of this type of property value the properties. Now, looking at the county's cost approach that they presented as their review value, they come in at $120 per square foot of land. As we saw in the last two cases, they applied $60 a foot for land. And as we heard on the last two cases, the assessor testified those are the preeminent locations in the county. So if the preeminent, apex properties are $60 a foot, it would stand to reason that this would be less than $60 a foot. Currently, their proposal's at $120 a foot. Just request the county or the board reduce based on the sales comparison approach. Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, it's just another board. I don't know. I feel like the county had the cart before the horse with the original assessment. And I kind of agree with that appellant that now there's like trying to get it down to a certain level, and to look at, what they're applying for, to try to justify that that's going to happen when it gets approved. So I don't know. I have thanks with this. Interested what other people think.
Yeah, I would agree with using the sales for based on this site plan was approved, but then I think the approach that Mr. Walter did to revise it for now. I know it's high.
Yeah, I think it's changed from 2024 to 2025.
That's my thought exactly. I think it's increased more than it should have, so.
Yeah, we can use the new number that is provided, but we have to be conscious that it's not the site plan that is approved.
That's not what,
That is not approved.
right, that's what I'm saying. I just, I don't know. I'm really between the 70 million and the balance number. Mr. Gates, where are you?
I was gonna say, the 70 million sounds, it's something the county had come up with at one point.
Right, it's still an increase from, a significant increase from 2024. But how it got 100.
The other option is looking at that land value is the site plan. And that's a big difference.
The site plan's not approved yet, so.
Right. Or go to 24 and see what, push it to next year with it.
I would have said that, but the appellant's higher than that, so I would just probably go with the appellant's number.
But the numbers coming up also using the same approach that the 70 is coming from. Just using
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you look that?
I can, I'm
It's
just
messy.
yeah,
This is just such a,
because of, we haven't used that methodology if the site plan wasn't approved in any other case, but it is,
I don't feel comfortable going all the way back to the 55 million. Like I said, I would be either the appellants made a good argument, or I could live with the 70 million. I just don't want it to revert back, to the 102. So where are you?
I would go with the appellant's number.
Mark, where are you?
I would do that. I can see that too, because it's still pushing it up.
If you look at page 59, the pounds number is just using lower numbers that were used anyway. So I would probably go, if we were gonna do that, with the 788. I mean, 78 and 588. Sure, I'll make a motion that we reduce the assessment to 70,588,000 based on using the most approach suggested, using the numbers that the county would have used anyway.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Opposed, none. Okay, the assessment is reduced to 70,588,000, even based on using the county's cost approach. Thank you. Okay, next case is RPC 1602730, 1901 Fort Myer. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this case.
Yes, thank you. So this is the Roslyn Gateway site plan. As of the date of value, this property consisted of 516,000 square feet of office FAR, 148 hotel keys, and 273 multifamily units that could be developed. Now, this property, as the board is aware from last year's hearing and from my referencing in the prior cases, this property sold in a widely marketed, professionally marketed arm's length transaction in November of 2023. Cushman and Wakefield handled the marketing of this property. Cushman marketed the property beginning in early 2022. Teasers were sent to more than 5,000 qualified investors. The initial call for offers returned 10 bids. The best bid of those 10 ultimately fell out during due diligence. Cushman then relaunched the property to the market and the bidders that they had previously contacted. They received multiple bids on this additional launch and requested best and finals from the highest 3 bidders. Ultimately, Penzance's bid was the best offer received at $52 million. This property traded and closed at $52 million in mid-November 2023. Now, the board, again, did hear this case last year and reduced the assessment to that sale price at $52 million. For tax year 2025, the assessor's office has increased that assessment set by the board by 15% to $59.7 million, despite no improvements at the property nor in the market. This property, as you can see from the I&E filed on page 34 of the assessor's memo, was generating excess income due to the remaining leases in place at the time of sale. That excess income was roughly $3.9 million per year. As you can see on that I&E, that's expected to decrease going forward. So as of 1/1/24, the owner could expect to earn $3.9 million in excess income. As of 1/1/25, some of those leases roll. The owner's expecting less and less excess income as the property goes forward. So we know that from the date of sale to the date of value, over that 13-month period of time, the owners knew they had less positive NOI being generated from the existing office buildings. This, of course, was factored into the sale price. Therefore, the sale price should be reduced by 1 year less of NOI coming in from the property, 1 year fewer positive NOI remaining at the property as of January 1, 2025. That's how we valued the property. If you turn to page 30 of the assessor memo, you'll see that we imputed the unadjusted sale price. We didn't make any adjustments for the factors in the market that I've espoused upon, including, continuing decreased demand for this type of site plan, or the increased cost of construction since the date of sale. We didn't adjust for that. We just took the raw sale price from November of 2023. And from that, we deducted 1 year of actual NOI reported on that 2024 I&E after taxes, which reflects the reduced positive NOI at the property that it can expect to generate going forward. That's how we got to the claim value of $48,766,000. Now, I assume we're going to hear Mr. Peralta testify that the owner had a pending application for a major site plan amendment that was filed in November of 2024. As of the date of value, this application was pending and had not been acted on by the county. As we've seen with other cases in similar circumstances, this rezoning application will be considered by the assessment on subsequent appeals after its approval. However, what we've heard from Mr. Peralta today is since it doesn't have 4.1 approval on that new pending application, it sounds as though the correct approach to value it is the cost approach. That's what we heard on the last case. He said, it doesn't have 4.1 approval, therefore we're going to use the cost approach. Here, they put in a pending application as of the first of the year. Pending, of course, doesn't have 4.1 approval, yet the county has made no adjustment in this case. So the county is supporting the initial assessment, which, it appears the support for that only comes from this pending application. Again, there's no sales comps provided by the assessor to support their sales comparison valuation. We've heard there's a black box of information they have that they haven't provided and can't provide and won't provide. It's literally in the statute in black and white. You have to provide how you got to these values. It's a sales comparison approach to value. If they got the analysis of sales from an appraisal, why can't they just say these are the sales we used? These are the sales that support $60 a foot of office FAR. We know that the best sale comp for a property is the sale of the actual property. We have that in this case. We have this property trading at $52 million in November of 23. Now, this property has not increased by $7 million from over the course of 2024. We know that the market has continued to deteriorate. This site plan is majority office. Office has continued to plummet, less demand, less profitability. We've seen many cases where owners are trying to take their buildings offline. There's simply no demand. And that's the case with this one. The site plan has not increased in value since the date of sale. As of the date of value, it largely stood as it stood on the date of sale in November of 23. The only changes have been negative to value. There's been increased cost of construction, increased supply in the market for multifamily properties, which in turn reduces the amount of positive rent growth. It's gone from, the heyday of 2021, 2022, when all the developers jumped into multifamily. Well, all of that started to come online over the course of 23, 24. In fact, since 2020, multifamily supply has increased over 20%. We've seen about just under 3,000 units come online over the course of 2024. That increases supply. That has met the demand in the market. And as a result, rent growth has leveled off. It's gone from that 5-6% down to just over 1%. So the project just doesn't pencil the same way it did at the date of sale. We've made no adjustment for any of that. We've been conservative with our value. Said, look at this professionally marketed, widely bid on property. It was sold from one sophisticated buyer or one sophisticated seller, JBG Smith, to a sophisticated buyer, Penzance, both active in the market. They came to a meeting of the minds that the value of this site plan as it exists on the date of value was $52 million. Now, we saw in the last case, the assessor did reduce the value for the site plan, reducing the assessment to recognize the reduced value for that type of site plan, that magnitude of site plan. In this case, the assessor is not recommending a reduction. They are arguing for an increase of 15% year over year, despite there being no sales that happened over the course of 2024 to support that. In fact, we've presented to the board several sales that were under contract as of the first of the year that are even lower than this. So this appears to be a high watermark sale over the past 2 years. So the county is asserting that the value has actually increased by 15%. There's just no sales to support that. The value has not increased. If anything, it's decreased due to less demand for multifamily, less demand for office, and 1 year less of positive NOI that the property is generating. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. For this property, what's different from this property versus the few properties that we had prior today is that there was a final site plan approval on this property as of the January 1, 2025. They did apply for a change in that site plan, and that was actually approved in this year as well. So again, it's different from what we heard in the previous cases. There was a final site plan approval. Therefore, we did apply the $60 per FAR based on that approval. And that's what you see as far as the original assessment is concerned. We do know and understand that this property is being currently leased as an office, and they have leases in place until 2027. You'll see major tenants, Language Associates has a lease until 2032. So they do have income coming in for this property as office, and we do account for that site plan approval, which, if you look at the history of this property from 2021 up until 2023, this property has been achieving an NOI of more than $11 million. Currently, the property is 83,726 vacant, but again, that's moving towards that final redevelopment for the site, which again, they gained approval for that change in final site plan in 2025. You'll see on the summary sheet that the original value was $559,679,900, and that's actually a decrease from our original last year's assessment. What Mr. Harmon is trying to convey is that there's a decrease based or an increase based on the board's reduction to the sales price at 52 million. Again, that's a 2023 sale. We are already 2 years ahead, and what has happened since that sale? They did try to gain another change in their final site plan, sort of change from the office to actual residential. You'll see on the summary page again that originally they had 516,432 square feet of office, 148 hotel rooms, and apartments of 273 units. And now with the rezoning change and the revised site plan approval, they're now at 845 residential units and 14,500 for retail space. You'll see the change in value there, and you'll see that change for next year's assessment based on this new site plan approval. But as it stands as 1/1/2025, that value is equalized with other 4.1 site plan approved properties at $60 per FAR. And we ask that the board confirm the original assessment at $59,679,900. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Brault, if you give us any final comments in your minute, please.
No, just again, looking at the change in value based upon the board's reduction last year, it's actually a decrease of $1,913,900 based upon our original value that we had in 2024 versus what we're valuing this property at this year, $59,679,900. And we asked the board to confirm that value. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. So the fact of the matter is this property sold in a widely marketed, professionally brokered sale that received significant market interest in November of 2023. The best value received from more than 10 bidders was $52 million. Nothing in the market or at the property has changed over the course of 2024 that would support the county's proposed increase of 15% over that sale price. The sale price, I'll mention just for the record, a recent sale of the subject property by law is to be given considerable weight. Here, we've heard the assessor testify he gave the sale no weight. In fact, he only compares his assessment to his prior assessment. We know the prior assessment was wrong because it didn't consider the sale. So using that as a benchmark is not a good benchmark. The sale was $52 million. Nothing in the market or at the property has changed. They did have a pending site plan, major site plan amendment proposed. But again, that was pending. In the effort of uniformity and equalization, that'll be picked up on the subsequent assessment if and when it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, it's just my word. I mean, I'll just say, I think one thing the appellant said the less income was factored into the sales price. We reduced it last year based on the sales price. You know, if you look at it, I know that appellant is arguing that it went up so significantly, but we reduced it back to the 52 million. So, you know, with the new pending site plan in there, I'm fine with the county's assessment.
So I'm okay with it. I mean, it indicates here 59,682, but please deducting also the 2,000 improvement value to 59,679,900. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
The 59,682.
The 59,679,900 because he's reducing the improvement value.
Right? Are you,
I'm okay.
Mr. Yates?
I'm all right with it. I mean, it's if going to market, this property has a site plan in place with amendments, but it also has value and income coming in. That carries. It's an attractive position for some buyer. So I could go with this.
All right, Mr. Penrose?
Yes, I moved, I guess it would be a reduction to 59,679,900 based on the current assessment minus the improvement value.
Why are we taking that?
That's what the appraiser is suggesting in the summary sheet.
Okay, all right, then I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, the assessment is reduced per the county's suggestion to 59,679,900. And that is taking the current assessment and reducing it by the improvement value. Thank you. And the final case is RPC 140600079 at 4040 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you. So 4040 Wilson Boulevard, this is a mixed-use building consisting of 225,000 square feet of office and retail space, in addition to 250 multifamily units. This is the property right there at Wilson and Randolph, right there in Ballston. The 2025 assessment represents an increase of nearly $17 million, which is 8% over the 2024 assessment, despite NOI at the property increasing only 4% year over year. Now, the county's review suggests an even greater increase year over year of 15.4%. And then the county's third opinion of value provided with the reconstruction suggests a value that is still higher at 17.1% year over year increase. Again, NOI at this property only increased 4% year over year. Now, we do have a useful data point on this property. We're trying to determine what would it transact at in an arm's length transaction. This property was previously owned in a 50-50 partnership between Kodiak and Brandywine. On December 24th of last year, Kodiak bought out Brandywine's 50% share of the property. So both of these partners are they're both sophisticated operators in the area and determined they came to a meeting of the minds that the fair market value of the property was $190 million. That's as of December 24th of 2024. Now, this property was not marketed for sale, yet the county does include it on their list of sales. Keep in mind that this also is not fatal per the county's logic. The county, there's one sale that is the basis of every one of the county's office cap rates this year. That sale was also not marketed. That sale was a transaction between related parties. So the assessor appears to be trying to dismiss this sale price as not reflective of market value because it was not marketed and it was between related parties. Yet the assessor, on the other hand, had no issues using a non-market a property that wasn't marketed, and it was also between related parties as a basis to create all the cap rates for office properties in the county. So please keep that in mind when analyzing this data point. The assessor had zero qualms about a non-marketed sale between related parties when the assessor liked that sale price. But now when the assessor doesn't like the sale price, he says, no, it wasn't marketed. It was between related parties. Can't consider it. So that's, we've provided that support in the board book showing that's how the cap rates were developed. The board has endorsed this, and the assessor has ultimately put the board in a bit of a pickle. On the one hand, the assessor has repeatedly all year since June asked the board to endorse his cap rates. Those cap rates, of course, are derived from the property that sold that wasn't marketed, is sold between related parties. It was a single sale. Assessor says, please endorse this. It's the highest sale on the market. That's what I've developed my cap rates from, and the board has done that. Now the assessor, on the other hand, is saying, well, here's the same fact pattern, but you shouldn't agree to it because we don't like the value. So, it's a bit of a pickle. On the one hand, we've assessed every office based on a cap rate of a non-marketed sale that was between related parties. Here, the assessor is testifying today that a non-marketed sale between related parties should carry no weight. So you can see the flaw in the logic on that. Now, this property is complex, and I do only have 8 minutes to address it, so unfortunately, I won't be able to present everything that is necessary. This property, again, is assessed at $228 million, so please ask questions during the Q&A for anything that I'm not able to address. I want to start with the apartment portion of this property. Now, the county summary page is pretty difficult to read. I had to pull out a magnifying glass and zoom in. So if you'd be so kind as to turn your attention to page 26 of the PDF, you'll see our summary of facts and the operating history of the apartment portion of this property. Looking at the 3-year reporting NOI for this property, the apartment portion, 2022 reported 6.3 million, 2023 reported 6.7 million in NOI, and 2024 reported 7 million in NOI. Compare that to the current assessment, which assumes an NOI of $7.73 million. That, of course, is more than 10% greater than what it's reported in the high water mark over the past 3 years of just $7 million. Now, being apartments, we are, of course, bound by the Virginia Code Section 58.1-3295.1, which requires actual income and expenses to be considered for multifamily properties. The purpose of this statute, as we've discussed, is to ensure renters are taxed in the same manner as homeowners. To this end, the assessor doesn't speculate about the value of single-family homes based on what they could sell for in the future. They don't project out. They say, what is the value based on sales comps prior to the date of value? That's how we're going to come up with the assessment for January 1. That's the same thing here. That's what the statute is trying to ensure. Renters are ensured the same benefit of looking what has it reported, not what could it potentially report. The current assessment saying, hey, we're projecting over a 10% increase. It could do that, sure, but that's not uniform with homeowners. Homeowners are assessed based on what has happened, not on what could or may happen. Here, again, the assessor assumes a 10% increase on the assessment and a 7% increase in NOI on his review. This, again, is not uniform or equalized with other apartment assessments either. We've reviewed and presented many apartment properties to the board this year. In many of those cases, the assessor comes in right at prior year NOI. So by speculating a 10% increase to NOI on the multifamily portion of this property, this assessment is not uniform or equalized with other multifamily properties in the county, nor is it in compliance with that Virginia statute that is there to protect renters, to make sure they don't pay taxes that are higher than their fair share. Now, the assessment is also so high because on the multifamily, the NOI is so high because it assumes significant rent growth. It projects a 6.7% increase in effective gross income. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that rent growth has been just over 1% in the county through September. So a 6.7% increase is pretty egregious. The assessor's review projects a 5.3% increase, still well above actual, still well above where the market is, still well above what the property has reported and what it's supposed to be assessed on. The assessment also assumes that operating expenses will decrease in 25 from what was reported in 24. We know that's not the case due to ever-present inflation increasing the cost of both labor and materials. The assessor's review projects no change in operating expenses. So that's how the assessment gets an increase of 10% in NOI. Now, keep in mind that apartment portion was well occupied over the course of 24. So that NOI reported is reflective of just 3.6% in vacancy and collection loss. So that means that, for the entirety of the year, it was well occupied, and yet it's still reporting just $7 million in NOI. Now, switching to the office portion, you'll see, looking at page 27 of the PDF, the trailing 3-year operating history, this portion of the property has also been well occupied. In 2024, it was at a stabilized occupancy and reported just $6.3 million in NOI. Now, as you can see on page 27, we don't disagree with the assessor's projected NOI for this property. In fact, we're slightly higher. However, if you, all things considered, if you take the net and let's concede the cap rate argument, as we've heard the board endorse the county's cap rates ad nauseum this year. So conceding that, our proposed values at the county's cap rates increase the office portion by just over 4.4 million and decrease the multifamily portion by 12.5 million. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. As the appellant mentions, this case is a little difficult to put it all in one summary sheet. We tried our best to kind of outline what the differences are between the current assessment versus what the appellant feels is the value of this property. When looking at the original assessment, we did project income slightly higher than what was seen in the history of the property. But as you see from 22 to 23, actually from 2021, there's increases in rent about 8% from 21 to 2022, and then another 11.59% year over year from 2022 to 2023. And then when looking at the growth of the property, we did see that looking at the actual reported income that this apartment had at 8.9 million. We did take another approach when looking at the apartment rent roll. I'm not sure if you can turn to that page. We did project based on those averages that were provided. Again, it was just a snapshot of what was being received at the time when they submitted the INE versus what the actual projections could be, the gross potential. And we did capture about 11 units that were not occupied or reported vacant for this property. And then we did equate about another $494,607 for those 11 units, which the majority of those units were two-bedroom of the larger units in the subject property. We have about 8 units, 4 units, a two-bedroom, two-bath, 3 units, two-bedroom, two-bath, larger square feet. And then we have another two-bedroom, 2.5-bath that was shown as vacant for this property. So when reconstructing this property, as far as the apartment portion is concerned, in E1 to E1.1, we did include those vacant units there to the original actual projected figure that was reported in the 2024 INE. And then we just went down a line and copied over exactly what was reported as far as the vacancy and the expenses. And then when you look at that overall projection or reconstruction, that's closer to 7.5 million is what we found to be the potential for this property, given those 11 units included in that projection. So then when you compare that to the county's test in column F1, you'll find that we did project around that 7.5 figure to come up with a value that was actually higher than the original, or lower than the original assessment at 135,469,300. Again, that's a reduction from the original assessment there. And then when looking at the office portion, we know that after the analysis of the rent roll, that the average in-place rents are at $56.13 for the office space, and then retail was at $54.64, and another $28.07 for another portion of that retail. So when looking at our office test compared to what was originally sent in the 2024 INE. Now you're comparing E2, columns E2 and E2.2 to F2. You'll see that the original assessment, the original reporting on the 2024 INE, that 8.9 million figure, doesn't include the 2024 leases that were in this property. So if you turn to our rent roll, you'll see that Morse Corp Inc. Leased space on February 1st of 2024, and Answer leased space at on 4/25/2024. Answer, which leased about 46,576 square feet on the property, which is the second highest in the subject property. That lease didn't start until April 25th. So when you look at that original figure that was reported in 2024 at 8.9 figure, you must understand that there's about 5 months of rent that wasn't reported because those leases didn't start until the second month of the year, or the fourth month of the year, later part of that fourth month. And so what the county attempted to do is reconstruct that and put those figures back into the gross potential of the property, and then grossed it out for the year and gave you a projection, or reconstruction, if you will, of that NOI. And also, the original 2024 INE is reporting a 2.1 million concession figure, and that should be amortized over the life of those leases, which you'll see for that Answer lease is over 12 years. So, if you amortize that, or average out that $2 million figure over 12 years, we're at only 166,000 for that particular tenant. But again, there's another tenant there. I'm not sure exactly if there's concessions for that tenant as well, but those concessions should have been are reported in the 1 year versus amortized over the term of the lease. So that original reporting of 6.3 million in NOI is skewed somewhat because of those concessions. But if you look back and see the reconstruction, adding that vacant square footage income, and then looking at how E2.2 compares to F2, our reconstruction again, our test again considers the rents that are in place. Again, we're at $56. The county's testing at $54 for the leases in place. We're shy $307,876 from our reconstruction of what the gross potential of the property could be. And then looking at the overall NOI, we're again about 300,000 less than what the reconstruction shows. So we are a bit higher than what is the appellant is projecting for this property, but again, it's not as high as what it should be, because in response to the appellant's pro forma, because of those rents that are used, they're using a $47.71 rent versus what we've shown in the property. So as a total, the reconstruction and the test shows a total of 244,398,800, which is higher than the original assessment. So we asked for the original assessment to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you both. Questions from board members? Any? No? All right. Any final comments, Mr. Peralta?
No, again, even retesting this property multiple times, I think the office portion is, at 11,000 at 5% vacant. This property is well stabilized on the office portion. Even if you discount the apartment portion to what it originally reported without that vacant income, the combined value still amounts to more than the original assessment. So we ask that the board confirm the original assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So as info, the owner does report full occupancy for multifamily, so there's no reason to gross up for vacant units. What that does is double count rent on those units. This I think is an error of the appraiser assessing an office, or I'm sorry, multifamily. They do report grossed up at 100%. So his review resulted in an NOI of 7.5 million by double counting those 11 units. Again, tying it back to the statute on that multifamily, using actual, even the review, double counting those 11 units results in a significant increase of prior year NOI. Now, we heard Mr. Peralta testify that concessions need to be amortized. This is inconsistent with prior testimony of his, and it actually hasn't happened on his review. So those review values, the test column, the reconstruction column, haven't amortized. So he says it needs to happen, yet it didn't. Our proposed values result in an increase of 4.4 million in the office portion of the property, a $12.5 million decrease in the multifamily portion, net value of $220,484,000. That's a 4.1% increase from 2024, which is in line with what the NOI at the property has done. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board. Folks. Mr. Peralta?
No, no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Penaranda?
I think the revision is a little bit aggressive. The only thing I was looking at is the expenses maybe on the apartments.
Mhm.
And then maybe change increasing to 23% instead of 21.5%. That reduces the total value a little bit to 225,953,800. But that's the only thing that I saw that if that could use a little bit.
And I'm sorry, what did you change the expenses to?
23%.
Mendez?
I did almost the same thing. My number was a little higher, but I would go with that.
Okay.
Mr. Yates, where are you?
That'd be fine. Yeah,
That'd be fine.
yes.
And Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I'm going to be reduce the assessment to 225,953,800. That's based on increasing the expenses of the apartment assessment, 23%.
That's on
From
the,
the current assessment.
oh, from the original. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, motion is second by Mr. Mendez. All in favor? Aye, opposed, none. Okay, the assessment is reduced to 225,953,800 based on increasing the apartment expense rate to 23% off the original appraisal. Okay, that completes the agenda. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Just wanted to make clarification before we end on case number 4, 701 12th Street, which we reduced to. It is based on using sales comparison approach, not the cost.
Oh, jeez, okay. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, all right. Then we will stand adjourned here at 10:39. Reconvene next Tuesday, October 28th, virtually for everyone at 9 a.m. Thank you.